Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. It is a Friday, April 1st. It is definitely a very interesting day. I'm sure you know this by now. This is not April Fool's, but Amazon lost today. They lost. Staten Island workers, the Amazon Labor Union, ALU, won the vote. It was close, but they won. And that's after Amazon pulled all the tricks that they normally pull. So congratulations to everyone in Staten Island who has been organizing for years, who lost one fight, kept going, and did it on their own without outside help. A tight crew led by our dear friend, Christian Smalls. I really have nothing else to say today except congratulations. This is how you do it. You're an inspiration. As my mentor texted me a few minutes ago, this is history. This is history. So I just want to take this moment to honor Chris Smalls and the ALU crew and all Amazon workers across the country organizing, trying to do the same thing. All workers organizing across the country, fighting for fair labor. This is a show today all about labor and the intersectionality of how really, we start off the show today talking about women's health. But, you know, the reason why there's an attack on women's health is there's a right-wing, white supremacist, religious aspect to this, which has, the same places around the country where unions have been completely wrecked. Right-to-work states are the same states where we're seeing women's health under attack. And, of course, that's going all the way to the Supreme Court, as well as the fight against labor. Labor is an intersectional issue, and we are going to talk about that all day today. This is it. This is a show. If you wanted to talk about labor, this is the show. If you wanted to hear about how labor intersects with fighting for labor, intersects with fighting for women and people of color, this is the show. Later on, we're going to have Erica Smiley and Sarita Gupta on, the authors of The Future We Need, Organizing for Better Democracy in the 21st Century. And we're going to wrap the show talking about Amazon with the one and only Kim Kelly. But first up, so excited. Really very excited to have this conversation because it's coming up more and more. This conversation is happening more in my life with women I know. Genevieve Grabman is joining us next. She is the author of Challenging Pregnancy, A Journey Through the Politics and Science of Healthcare in America. We will be right back with Genevieve Grabman.
The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
So I was reading the New York Times this weekend. Don't shoot me. I know some of you are critical. Call me old-fashioned. I was reading the New York Times this weekend, and there was a piece that discussed how, I think a lot of women know this, how the medical industry is basically ignoring half of the population, that the amount of money, the focus, there are blind spots all over the industry when it comes to women's health. And our next guest is, she wrote a book called Challenging Pregnancy, A Journey Through the Politics and Science of Healthcare in America. I got it right here. That just discusses just that. Genevieve Grabman is the author of Challenging Pregnancy. She's also a policy and communications lead at the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and previously served as Director of Government Relations for for Reproductive Health, also an attorney, and has worked for the WHO and the Pan American Health Organization. Genevieve, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. How is my sound? Are you able to hear me well?
You sound great. Yes.
Fantastic,
perfect.
because I'm doing what every mom does. I'm multitasking from my minivan.
From your minivan. I love it.
Absolutely. But
so I want, go ahead.
I was going to say, you are so right that both medical professionals and, more importantly, politicians who try to act as medical professionals without any medical background or knowledge are ignoring more than half of our population, that portion of the population that could fall pregnant. And I'm so concerned about this, and I'm so concerned about it right now as the Supreme Court is poised to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is why my publisher and I timed my book to come out now, as the court is considering what to do about abortion in this country, so that we can have a conversation and to ask ourselves, what do we, the people, really want for ourselves and for the health of our people?
It's so interesting because there's a lot of layers to this, right? And what I really appreciate about this book, which stems out of your story, which I'm going to ask you about in a second, is that when you have policies like this, it's not just about abortion, although it is very much about abortion. It's also about just the institutions, the medical, institutions, whether it's, in politics and actual decision making, and whether a woman has any sort of authority over her own body. In many ways, but it's also about like funding, how much money is put into women's health. I have my own personal story from this last year. I've told our audience before, those who haven't heard it. I went to go get my eggs frozen last summer in Greece. My family's from Greece. Much, much cheaper. They do a wonderful job. I went to go get my eggs frozen at 37, and they retrieved 3 viable eggs, which is extremely, extremely low for a woman, a healthy woman in her late 30s. And I said to the doctor, a man, and also very religious, that's something that we're not really, they don't openly do that, at least here in our, you don't have like crosses and icons in your health facility. Well, yeah, you're right. So I said to the doctor, I said, as I've done to every single doctor since I was 16 years old, do I have endometriosis? And he looked at me and said, oh, yeah. And I said, I'm sorry, what? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I don't understand. For at least twice a year since I was 16 years old, I have been asking my doctor if I have endometriosis based on the excruciating menstrual cramps I've had since I was 16, some of which people have called ambulance on me for. And, I've dealt with it over the years on my own. And he said, oh, I can measure it through your blood. There's a new way of detecting it in Greece. And I walked away from that and I thought, clearly these things are linked. And he said it so passively. And then I just went through a wave of emotions of anger and frustration and thinking about our medical system and why is it that I was challenged. And then when I came back to my OBGYN here and I told him the story, he scoffed at me. And he's no longer my OBGYN. Anyways, you read these stories now, and I'm so happy that they're finally coming out. Just how women have to literally do research, keep asking, go to different doctors. It was 21 years until I got diagnosed. And if I had known that in my early 30s, maybe I would have frozen my eggs and had a very different situation. We don't know for sure. But this is not an uncommon story. You have a story that you start off your book with and led you down this path. So I'm very curious, how did this all happen?
So, I'm very interested in your story, and I want to riff off on some of the parts of it, because my story is, just in brief, I got pregnant with identical twins. Those identical twins' blood vessels fused across the amniotic sacs in a condition called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. And in addition, the pregnancy was complicated by other conditions, both kind of humorous, like maybe a parasitic triplet, and not so funny, such as selective intrauterine growth restriction, SIGR, and TTTS, the twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, and SIGR are both incredibly fatal conditions for the fetuses that suffer from them. And TTTS can also it can be fatal for the pregnant person carrying the pregnancy. Because what happens with that condition is that one twin produces almost no amniotic fluid and pumps all its blood away to the recipient twin, who, because that twin is receiving so much blood, produces a ton of amniotic fluid. And that causes all sorts of terrible repercussions for that fetus as it tries to develop, and also for the person carrying the pregnancy. Right. So much pressure from all that amniotic fluid. So that's what happened to me. But then here's where I want to riff off of your story. I went and tried to get help, right? So that's what we do. We go and we show up at doctors' offices and we say, help us, please, right? You know, the doctors say something might not be right. And then what do we do about it? And that's where I ran, smack on into the walls of politics, but also religion. Kind of like what you said. You said in Greece, that it's open if a physician holds a particular religious viewpoint, but it's also very open in the United States, especially in rural areas where the Catholic Church now has consolidated and controls most hospitalized care. And that means that the Catholic Church controls what obstetrical care and what surgical care is available to those who are having complicated pregnancies. Which means that the care that a person receives, even if that person is not Catholic, is determined by the dogma of the Catholic Church. And that was part of my story, because skipping ahead a couple of steps, I ultimately got discharged from secular hospitals and had to go to what was left for me was a Catholic hospital to provide me care. And it wasn't that I had sought the Catholic hospital out, mind you, I sought a doctor out, like the best doctor around in maternal fetal medicine, but his office happened to be located in the hospital compound of a Catholic hospital, which meant that those restrictions, those dogmatic restrictions, applied to him, who was not Catholic, and to me, who is Catholic, but did not want those restrictions to apply to me. I wanted medicine and science to determine the outcome of my pregnancy and my health and my fate. But ultimately, what determined what I could and couldn't do were politics that permit the intrusion of religion into medicine, especially medicine that as it affects reproductive health, women's health, and maternal health. And in addition, in the end, I had to rely on my luck and, frankly, my privilege to come through that pregnancy alive and with my twins. And it should not be in the United States in 2022 that we are asking women to rely on their luck, and that we are privileging those people who are white and relatively wealthy and who have education for having good outcomes of their pregnancy, and condemning all those who are not those categories to having poor outcomes. That is not what I believe our people want for ourselves in the United States and in 2022.
I mean, what's just so bizarre about this, excuse me, is it's very clear that whether it's, these ectopic pregnancies being banned in Missouri, I mean, it's very clear that this isn't even, it's not about the baby, clearly. And if they want, if there's some sort of religious aspect to this, let's just give them that for a second. If there's some sort of religious aspect in terms of wanting to see a pregnancy carried out, fine. But to attack women's health as a whole, it's bad for society. It's bad for the mother's health. It's bad for the family. I mean, let's use their terms. I don't really get at that point, why? Other than just, I know it sounds bizarre and this is what your book's about, but at the end of the day, I just don't understand. If you're a white man who doesn't want a woman to have autonomy over their body, that's one thing. It's another thing to basically make it so it's unhealthy. I mean, if you're a white man who wants to have children, you need to have a viable, healthy mother in the most brutal way.
That is the message I'm trying to get out. That's the message, because I think when we think of abortion, right, we see this as a question. The anti-abortion crowd has been very, very effective. There's me looking slightly better.
You look great.
The anti-abortion crowd has been very, very effective in framing this as the woman's life or choices against the baby's life.
Mm.
And that's been effective because you can say, you know, people like babies. Like, why would you not choose the baby in that situation? But what I'm trying to point out is that I was choosing the baby. I wanted this pregnancy.
That's right.
I wanted to come out of the pregnancy with, I didn't think I could have 2 kids. So I tried to gamble. I said, just give me one. Just give me one live baby. I realized the other one's going to die. Just give me one. What procedures could you use to save one?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't save one, just save me, because you want to know what I had at home? Another baby that I was nursing, that was
Oh my
sustained by my
gosh.
breast milk.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I like, you know, I was very efficient. I had 3 kids in 2 years. So,
Are you Irish?
yeah, how'd you know? So yeah, I mean, and so I was trying to save a pregnancy, but you want to know what the flip side of destruction is? Creation. Who saved me was ultimately, when all my hope was lost, when all the doctors had discharged me, who saved me was an abortion doctor, a former abortion doctor, because he told me, with the techniques he knew how to, with the techniques he used and his knowledge that he had to terminate a pregnancy, he used those same techniques and knowledge to save my pregnancy. And what I am trying to say is, when you outlaw training, techniques, words, medicines, and tools, you are outlawing the use of those same things to save wanted pregnancies. And the result of that is you are not going to have people who are being able to bring forth pregnancy and life. I wonder if that's what we really want.
When you talk to politicians who disagree, how have they received, or people in the policy space, I should say, even the anti-abortion policy space, how do they receive this line of thought?
So I used to do a lot of advocacy on Capitol Hill around reproductive rights, and I had a reputation of playing really well with conservatives and Republicans, and conservative Democrats. There are conservatives who are Democrats, and I had you know, a reputation of playing well with everybody. And the reason why is this: because I completely get it. I get the arguments. I get why people feel that their religious beliefs compel them to stamp out abortion, to convince others that abortion is wrong. And they feel compelled, and they feel that their God and their religion is telling them that they have to take over the powers of government and the courts and, you know, the legislature, and outlaw something that they see as an offense to their religion and to their beliefs. But what I'm also, so I understand that. I come from a family background, I come from a religious background, that's the belief in it. But what I'm also trying to point out is that, number one, we do live in a secular society, right? And not everyone, in fact, not the majority, a small minority of Americans hold those beliefs around abortion. The majority of Americans hold different beliefs because they are of different religious backgrounds. And so if we are allowing one religion to dictate its views on reproductive health or in healthcare in general, we are ceding ground and saying that it's acceptable to have a theocracy in the United States. And I don't think that's what we believe as Americans. In addition, those of us who are religious and who are Catholic are not always adherent to all things in our religion at all times. And if we want to bear those penalties religiously, have the church come at us, have the church in its own, in our churches and for our religious leaders, you know, correct us. But that's not the role of our secular government, to enforce what is a religious belief or the religious consequences of not following a belief on us. That's the role of those adherents of the religion and those religious leaders of those adherents. So I keep trying to explain that ultimately the question we are facing is one of what is paramount in our society. Is science paramount? is the health of all of our people, no matter the religion, paramount? Or is it paramount in our society that we construct a theocracy where one religion and one religious view of the minority controls all of us? And I keep begging people, think about when you or someone you love needs any sort of health care. Are you going to allow your doctors and yourself to determine what health care you need? Or are you going to put those decisions in the slow and inflexible and not understanding hands of politicians or of hospital ethical boards that are dominated by nuns and priests who don't understand you, don't understand your needs, and don't understand what your family desires for itself? That's what we're doing. That's the future we're constructing for ourselves if Roe v. Wade falls and we permit state after state to restrict various healthcare techniques. And we know the outcome of what this is going to look like for American society. We need to turn only and look at El Salvador, where there are women in prison for having miscarriages, not abortions, spontaneous miscarriages, because of the suspicion, because they were reported as having had a miscarriage, and they couldn't prove that it was just a miscarriage, that they had done nothing to cause that miscarriage. So into prison they go. There are women who are exploding and dying because of ectopic pregnancies, because it is against the law in El Salvador, as it is proposed to be in Missouri, to intervene in an ectopic pregnancy. And so what does the woman do? She suffers horrendously while the physicians refuse to intervene, and she explodes. And if she does not hemorrhage and die, she is in excruciating pain and often is infected and has other terrible outcomes and is rendered infertile. And I wonder, is that what we want for our society? Do we wish to be the same as El Salvador or different than El Salvador? And the choice is ours.
And, you know, it's interesting you say in El Salvador, when there's a report, I mean, in Texas, there's it's like citizens reporting of citizens arrests of someone who either may have received an abortion or given an abortion. I mean, it's bizarro land. This is not what liberal democracies do, you know, in the classic sense. This is not, especially, I mean, it's so retroactive. It's like, I don't understand how we can argue before the UN that we're a liberal democracy if these are the types of bills that are being passed across the country.
Well, I mean, and this is why I think as much as, you know, I'm a lawyer, I'm a member of the Supreme Court bar, I'm married to a member of the Supreme Court bar who, you know, his entire practice is arguing before the Supreme Court. So obviously, I'm focused on the Supreme Court case, Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, which is the case that came out of Mississippi that is examining whether states may allow restrictions on pre-viability abortions. No live baby, no live fetus.
Folks. So explain that a little bit more for folks who may not understand.
So what the Supreme Court is trying to decide, and I was about to say it's kind of a red herring, but what the Supreme Court is about to decide is whether states, each individual state, may constitutionally, under the U.S. Constitution, restrict abortion. Currently, Roe v. Wade and then Planned Parenthood v. Casey, which is a case that came after Roe v. Wade, say that states may not restrict pre-viability abortions, and there has to be certain safeguards for the woman, for the woman's health. And what is at issue and after the pregnancy is viable, states may put restrictions on it. But what is at issue in Dobbs is before the pregnancy, the fetus is viable, before whether a state may say no, abortion is not permitted. And that is what 25 states are poised to do the second Roe v. Wade falls, because we believe that the Supreme Court will decide that, yes, it is permissible under the U.S. Constitution to prohibit abortion at all stages of the pregnancy, including before the fetus is viable. Jeez. And so the states are waiting to jump. But we still have an opportunity. We need to take this fight to our states, to our local jurisdictions, if we believe that this is not the type of dystopia we wish to live in.
Yeah.
And before it is too late, we need to be concentrating very hard on what is going on in our state and in our locality to preserve our access to all types of healthcare, to save ourselves and our wanted pregnancies, and to ensure that doctors can make the best healthcare decisions based on science, whether they're related to pregnancy or to other aspects of maternal health, or whether they're not related to pregnancy or maternal health whatsoever, but related to some other thing. It's not the role of politicians to determine our healthcare. It's the role of the patient and her doctor to determine healthcare.
If Roe v. Wade is overturned, if we have to go down that path state by state, fighting, where do you see just like women's health in general going? I mean, I see kind of two paths. Like there's no more funding maybe, and which affects many other issues, or Planned Parenthood is raising more money than they can even imagine. And I'm curious, like, how does the industry in general, how does research, which is already limited, how does the actual practice of women's health get affected beyond abortion itself?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, but it's also, again, consider it does not matter what a private organization, how much money it has. If that private organization, Planned Parenthood in this case, in your hypothetical, is prohibited by state law from doing anything in that state. And so again, we're setting up a divided America. We're setting up an America wherein in a few states abortion is going to be permitted, but not just abortion. In a few states, women are going to have to fly or flee when they have a pregnancy like mine and they want fetal surgery to try to save the fetuses, or they want some sort of intervention in an ectopic pregnancy. If they live in a state where the Catholic Church has taken over all options for healthcare, or they live in a state where they wish to get a tubal ligation because they can't bear to have their 6th or 7th or 8th child, and they no longer wish to be pregnant all the time. Or they're in a state where they were raped and they're 12 or 13 years old and their hips are too small to bear a pregnancy, and so they wish to terminate that pregnancy. So women are going to be fleeing from states that don't permit abortion in any circumstance, according to the laws and bills that are pending or have been passed in anticipation of Roe falling. And these women are going to be fleeing like internal refugees and migrants to other states that are more permissive and have more science-based healthcare. And again, why are we creating this division amongst our society and in our supposedly secular, democratic America? This is a really, it's not compassionate, but I would also say it's a violation of our democratic ideals, what we are constructing for ourselves. And I keep begging my readers, and I keep begging anyone who's listening to me, so your listeners, to think about this and to intervene locally and with their state politicians before it is too late, because you could very well wind up like me with a wanted pregnancy, but no practical way to save it.
Absolutely. I mean, when this Missouri bill came forward, I thought of my mother. When I think my first memory, honestly, was I was around 2 or 3 years old. If I don't know if your memories, if you can even have memories then, but I do for whatever reason. You can. I'm sitting next to my mother in a hospital bed, and I remember because of the ice cream cone, because I was that age, I had an ice cream cone with sprinkles, and I was next to my mother's hospital bed. And years later, I learned it was because my mother had an ectopic pregnancy, and she was getting ready to board an airplane with my father to go to San Francisco or something. And she wasn't feeling well in the car. And my dad, I don't know if he would do this today, but my dad was worried about her and took her straight to the hospital. And the doctor said, if you had boarded that plane, you would have died on the plane. But if you had waited a day, you would have died.
Yeah.
And so I think about people who do not have resources, and there will be refugees, but imagine you're unable to leave, you don't have the resources, and
most people don't have those resources, right?
Exactly.
So we know, I mean, just other research that's come out lately, due to the pandemic, what did we learn so much about our fellow Americans? And we found out that the average American does not even have $400 in savings to respond to a medical emergency, not even $400. So, I mean, do you know how much it's going to cost to like board an airplane, get a babysitter for your kids, go get a hotel, and then pay for an abortion? Because, by the way, if an abortion is illegal, they're also going to make insurance coverage of abortion illegal.
That's right.
So all that's going to have to come out of people's pockets. And again, we're creating a society where those with privilege and with wealth are prioritized, and everybody else is thrown under the bus. And that's, again, that is not what we stand for in America. That is not why our nation was constructed. It was constructed as a nation of opportunity for all people, no matter their background and no matter their prior economic circumstance. So I wonder why it is that we are allowing this to occur in our country, and why we've allowed ourselves to be really deceived by this narrative that it is a child's life versus just, a woman's capricious wishes, when in fact it is the pregnant person's life at risk, our democratic ideals at risk, and the question of whether we're allowing the wholesale takeover of our healthcare by a single religion.
Yep. Dark days. Well, this is a must-read book. It's a quick book for folks who want a good weekend read. A good weekend read. You can check it out right now. We have it up on University of Iowa Press. Of course, you can go straight to the publisher or anywhere else to buy books. But it's a fascinating conversation. I urge more men to read these books too, to understand. We have Fridays on our show is called Femme Fridays for a reason. A good chunk of YouTube politics is viewed by men. So, it's important, and our show does very well on Fridays. So we really, really are grateful that you've come on to talk about this, and please, keep us in the loop. We'd love to talk with you more. If there are any developments, you've been able to break it down very simply for us, given the complexities of the law. So we really appreciate it.
I would love to come back and talk with you once the court rules. I mean, I think we're all on tenterhooks to find out what that ruling is, and then what does it mean for us.
Exactly.
So I look
Thank
forward
you very
to
much
for the conversation. Thank you.
Genevieve Grabman, go check out Challenging Pregnancy, A Journey Through the Politics and Science of Healthcare in America. And I look at the cover. It's beautiful, right? All right. We will be right back after this quick little break. Oh boy. So on Wednesday, I had a migraine. I was sitting in this chair. We were getting ready to go, and I had a migraine. It hit me really fast. I did all of my things that I normally do to fight migraines: ginger juice, sometimes a little caffeine. I got that here too. But you know what I didn't do? I did not have my Sunset Lake CBD. And why didn't I? Because I didn't have any more left of what I normally take, which means I have to order. Because when I do take Sunset Lake CBD, when I smoke a little Sunset Lake CBD, my migraine will go away very quickly. Sunset Lake CBD is a farmer-owned company that ships craft CBD products directly from their farm in Vermont to your door. They have all types of products, everything from gummies, salves, tinctures, the drops that I put in to help me go to sleep at night. Now they have a new drop where it's got melatonin too, so it helps you go to sleep, and the CB helps you stay asleep, so you have a full night's sleep. I have the wildest dreams when I drop those drops in, which is pretty much every night at this point. Now that I think about it, it's changed my life. I'm not kidding, because I have like better night's sleep. They ended up flipping a farm, changing a Ben & Jerry's farm in Vermont to grow premium hemp. And when you support them, you're not only supporting sustainable agriculture, you're supporting the workers. This is a worker-owned company. When you support them, you're enhancing rural economies and creating meaningful employment in their community. They pay their minimum wage of $15 an hour, and the employees own the majority of the company. On top of all that, they support independent media because they're just cool people. They're awesome. They support the Majority Report. They support us, and they support that guy, David Pakman. Go check out sunsetlakecbd.com. When you go check it out and you order some products, you get 20% off your order if you type in NOMI, N-O-M-I. Don't forget to do that. I found out family members of mine weren't doing that, and so they didn't know. Type in NOMI, N-O-M-I, and you get 20% off of your order. The gummies are really dangerous. I'll just leave it there. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Oh, it is a crazy day. As you all know by now, Amazon workers in Staten Island, led by Christian Smalls, a friend of the show, regular of the show, they have won their union vote with their own union on top of it. Pretty incredible. So very busy day, and a great day to talk about a new economy. We are very excited today to have Erica Smiley on and Sarita Gupta. They are the authors of The Future We Need, Organizing for a Better Democracy in the 21st Century. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's good to be here, especially today.
Yeah. Thanks.
Right.
I can't stop smiling.
Well, your name is perfect for that. So
Yeah, right. I should have been a dentist, right?
I know. I always love like these lawyers, and you like they have these big ads, and their names like are like, you know, lawsuit or something. It's their last name. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
my name's Nomiki, which means law in Greek, and I am not a lawyer, but I should have been one.
So you understand.
I do. So I guess let's just maybe we'll start off with the concept of your book, and if you guys want to talk about what happened in Staten Island, let's go for it.
Oh my God. Okay, Sarita, if it's cool with you, I'll just kick it off. So here we're in this moment, right? So our book is basically called the Future We Need, Organizing for a Better Democracy in the 21st Century. And in it, we try to make several interventions. The first is to say that organizing and collective bargaining is actually one of the fundamental practices that will be a pathway to a healthy multiracial democracy. That is not just a political project like voting once a year, but that it's something where we need to involve the majority of people into decision-making in their economic lives as well, including in their employment relationships. And the second piece is that we want to expand this practice to employment or economic relationships beyond employment, or at least to apply to employment as it looks today versus how it looked in 1935. As we know, like, I don't think Robert Wagner could have predicted Amazon in 1935, right? And so trying to apply the framework, you know, I'm from North Carolina, and, you know, you don't go door to door in my community and say, you know, you have the right to elect a senator. You say you have the right to vote. And I think likewise today, and particularly given the ALU has proven, you aren't just saying you have the right to form a union, you're saying you should have the right to organize and collectively negotiate your conditions in the place where many Americans spend the most of their time, which is at work. And so that's the premise. And I guess the last thing I want to say, which feels maybe most important, particularly as we talk about the stuff that's happening today with the Amazon workers, right, is that Sarita and I argue, like, you can't do this without centering fight against white supremacy and patriarchy and gender discrimination, like that. It's not just a matter of doing what's morally right or being in alliance and an ally relationship with different movements, but that it's about recognizing the interests and the motivations of workers as whole people, and not centering those fights is a guarantee for our defeat. And so when you look at the work that the union in Staten Island did with Christian Smalls, right, which was activated after the Black Lives Matter movement kicked off, where you got a company like putting its PR stuff out on Black Lives Matter, but then firing Black workers for asking for protective equipment during a pandemic, right? Like, or you look at the workers in Bessemer right now, where it's too close to call, right? In Alabama, it is too close to call, even though the company put in millions of dollars, right? That when you talk to the leaders in the plant in Bessemer, they say, you know, we saw the murder of George Floyd and we realized that this fight here in the plant, that was our Black Lives Matter movement. So this is a workers' movement. It is a movement for racial justice. Like, these are people who don't see those things as separate strategies. This is a total sea change moment for the labor movement in the country.
Sarita, do you want to chime in response?
Yeah, well, I would ditto everything Smiley has just said, and just point out how important this victory is today. I love that we're streaming the voting and the celebration that's happening, but this win at Amazon on Staten Island is really part of a much bigger movement that we see happening right now as workers across the country are organizing, whether it's at Starbucks, right, where there's already 9 stores that have unionized, and we see more every day that are growing, or the 600, the hundreds of workers at the digital workers at New York Times who recently organized into a union. I mean, this is part of a much bigger moment, and our book really tries to lift up that the importance of the book actually right now is that we're in the midst of a great awakening, right? People often talk about this moment as the Great Resignation. People aren't quitting, right, their jobs and leaving the labor force. They're quitting their jobs and going to other jobs that will give them the kind of living wages and benefits and respect and dignity that they need, and agency, as we see through these unionizing efforts. And so what's really extraordinary about this moment is the fact that workers have recognized how important it is to collectively come together and actually make change in this way. And that's really the future we need.
It's interesting because you know, The Future We Need, the title of your book. I immediately thought of these recent like documentaries and docuseries and series on sort of the rise and fall of tech companies and tech leaders and you know, people who've built, you know, sort of scams, or maybe they weren't, they just went too far. But all around, like, you know, these are companies and people who sort of emerged around like the late 2000s after the economy crashed. And I think about how much our world, whether it's Uber and Lyft and of course Amazon, how much of our world has shifted because in some cases, many cases, tech companies, these newer tech companies post the Great Recession, they found little loopholes to create companies so that they didn't have to operate within labor. You know, Uber, I remember when they launched and they were in DC, they were calling the taxi cartel. And I never really, I look back at that, I'm like, oh, they just wanted to escape labor and hoard all the money. But now they're forced to reckon with it. You can't run away. So is this a new form of like labor organizing with these companies that thought they could get away with not paying labor?
Absolutely. This is the important thing to recognize. You're absolutely right that the way that work is structured has shifted, right? That transformation, along with, you know, a lot of different trends and forces at play, right? So there's the tech-driven changes, the financialization of our economy, and really globalization has really made it much harder for workers to figure out how to organize in this moment. But what's so exciting about some of these recent victories is that workers are innovating. They're not waiting for the laws to change. They're being really clear that we deserve and need better conditions, better wages, regardless of what our classification is, by the way. We deserve this kind of dignity and respect, and we're going to come together and organize for that kind of change. And so, there's lots of great examples of where we see this happening, especially in the platform economy, where you're exactly right. There's been this avoidance of the traditional employment relationships. And I often love to lift up the example of domestic workers, domestic workers who have historic.
I don't know if she froze on my end, but I'll finish what she was going to say. She was talking about domestic workers because they've historically not been seen as gig workers, right? When you think of gig workers, you think of Uber, you think of TaskRabbit, all these groups, but domestic workers are kind of the age-old gig workers, right? They've been gigging for individual employers for many, many centuries. And what's interesting is that recently a company called Handy, which is a platform that allows, helps us to assign domestic workers and nannies to particular jobs and tasks, kind of amalgamated the employment process for them. And so the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and particularly their gig workers, they organize Handy domestic workers as a part of the gig worker advocates group that they pulled together. And because they were excluded from the National Labor Relations Act, they were able to just negotiate a direct contract with Handy, just a private contract, like in court. I mean, it's completely innovative. And it's like Sarita was saying, we have platform workers from so many different sectors who are beginning to test different ways of negotiating directly, whether they're trying to say, okay, if you're going to say I'm not an employee, then create a framework for me to negotiate as an independent contractor, or you're saying this is misclassification, I'm an employee, I should be protected. Or in the case of the domestic workers, well, we'll just find a way outside of it to win. And so the thing that I want to emphasize, and welcome back, Sarita. I just tried to pick up.
It was smoothless, man. That was we
got it. See, this is why we could write together. Right? We're just mind meld. We're mind meld. But the thing that I feel like Sarita was saying, and something that Sarita actually taught me just in the context of some of her recent work is, right, the gig economy is not new. It's not a new shiny thing. They say it is, right? But I like to liken it to the digital camera, right? Taking pictures is not new. The digital camera, the platform is new. So with digital camera, we can take 200 pictures, choose our top 5, great. With the platforms, right, we can now use these apps, get things up to scale in a way that we couldn't, say, in 1850. However, the practice is still the same, which is to try to essentially socialize the risk while privatizing the benefit of a particular sector and a set of workers. And that's basically what's happening within the gig economy.
That's fascinating. It's interesting you say this. This morning, I went on TaskRabbit this week, and I hired a guy to come in to mount my TV on my wall. I was like, you know what? I'm an adult. I'm going to do this finally.
Well done.
David, our producer, knows because I called him and I said, I might be late to start the show today because I'm talking to this guy.
We all have that moment.
So I was talking with him about, work he's doing at TaskRabbit, and anytime in these situations, I always want to understand what it's like to be on the other end. And I try, because it helps inform just the show in particular. And he said, I used to work in this other industry in security, and I was making a very dangerous situation as a public security person, and he was making $1,400 a month, and I'm like, what? With a child. And he said, now at TaskRabbit, I'm making, $6,000 a month, and I'm able to do it. I said, that's interesting though, but do you ever think about benefits? And do you ever think about, and he was like, I'm really struggling because I just don't have those options now. He's like, if I could find a job and we all understand that in the world that we're in. Yes. But I asked him, I said, so how do you set the rates, or how much does the company make? And, and then he told me how he sets his rate. And he said, I have a friend who charges this much money, so I charge a little bit less because of, we keep losing Sarita just for our audio listeners. She'll come back soon. We know.
She'll be back.
But I was fascinated because then I said to him, I said, when I go on TaskRabbit, there are people charging $200 an hour.
Right.
People charging $30 an hour. So I don't understand, for the same exact tasks and experiences. And it's mind boggling to me. It's that they can be all over the place like this. And I know that sounds very simplistic but it really kind of messed with my mind today because I thought this is an industry that is just, it's bonkers. It's
completely unregulated.
Yeah. Like, what?
Well, that's the thing, though. It's not an industry. This is the thing I feel like we have to clarify. And this is the thing that Sarita is really good at clarifying is that it's not an industry. It is a practice. That's right. And it is a business practice. And the thing that's important is that it's a business practice that tries to deregulate certain things and certainly like decrease responsibility or at least like fissure it, as David Weil would say, while still being able to reap the benefits of lots of people doing this from the platform. Yeah. And I think that here's another example of like an example as a business practice versus an industry. So like construction trades. We all know building construction trades is an industry. That's in itself, it's a sector. No one will come against that. But there are companies now within the painting industry in particular who are trying to create their own platform so that an industrial company like an industrial paint job, like painting a big retail store or a bridge or a highway or whatever, that you can basically go on the platform like you could with TaskRabbit and find a painter to do that job, right? And like, so what are the implications? The implications are that, okay, you might get a cheaper price, maybe, who knows, like how they would set it up, but is it regulated? How can you prove that they're using paint that's been approved by the EPA? How do you prove that they've been through the appropriate certifications to do that job? Like all of these things, right? And that is not a change. It's not like it's a new industry. It is still paint. It is still industrial paint construction jobs, right? But like, you're creating a business practice that undermines workers' ability to negotiate improved and better standards and benefits, like you were talking about with the person from TaskRabbit. But you also are undermining safety for all of us, right? I guess you're deregulating a thing. Like, who knows who comes into your house and what remedy do you have if something happens?
I mean, I think about that as a woman. This morning, I was just thinking, I don't know who this person is who's coming in. He was lovely. He was a perfectly wonderful person. And
I'm
there's
sure
nothing
he's great.
But it was more just, as they're en route, I'm like, oh, wait, I'm alone in my house right now. Like, what do I, and I know that sounds silly, but it is a reflection of the industry. It's not a reflection of the individual. It's a reflection of how this platform operates. We've heard the horrible stories that come out of Uber with Uber drivers and rape and kidnapping and holdups on both ends.
On both ends. So I was going to say, because even the flip side, like what happens when a driver is attacked, right?
Which happens all the time. So this is happening. There are more and more unionization efforts. Hello, she's back. Hello, Sarita.
And we should all know for our listeners, Sarita is in residence at the University of Oregon for a couple of weeks for the purpose of this book. And so part of why her bandwidth is so low is she's calling in live, from the field per se.
Maybe there's a way with your camera. If you turn your camera off, maybe the audio will work better, and we're okay with that because we have audio here too.
Okay, so great,
wonderful.
Awesome.
You're just a circle now.
Yes, here we are.
So we were just talking about how because so many of these industries and platforms and tech companies or practices, as you said, they're unregulated. It's dangerous. Can be dangerous for both the individual who's working there, or the person on the receiving end.
That's right.
So in terms of just the aspect of how unionizing is, I mean, it's not that there are more strikes than ever, because this is, an interesting thing. After Striketober, people realize, no, actually, this is how often there are,
there are pretty consistent strikes. That's right.
Strikes consistently. It's just now reporters are reporting on it. But there are definitely more unionization efforts in these, different companies, whether it's Starbucks, who I'm surprised at this point hasn't even had, I'm surprised it took this long, frankly,
right.
Given, what we've been reading. but also other companies.
Right.
Is there a certain like formula that seems to work better than others?
Formula in terms of organizing, or formula?
Yeah,
in terms
like
of-
a type of company. I mean, people are reading a lot about Starbucks, and it's, when you read about it, you're like, okay, well, there's a lot of young people at Starbucks. They're more prone to, not exclusively, but there are a lot of young people pushing it, or more prone to organizing, who may be a little bit more informed about the washing of they've.
Yeah.
Oh, we gave you free education. That's good enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or the little, so there's sort of like a perfect storm with Starbucks. How many employees work at each Starbucks? Are there other types of, trends that you've seen where labor organizing is more effective?
What's really interesting about your question, Nomiki? I have to say, so Lane Wyndham, who we cite in the book, right, gives a really detailed history of the rise of the union busting industry, right? And one of the things that they did was profile what types of employment facilities, what type of businesses were more likely to unionize. And particularly in the 70s, as more women were coming into the workforce, as more people of color were coming in after the Civil Rights Act, that they had a very clear metric that could measure, like, based on the number of women in the facility, the number of Black and brown people in the facility, based on the age demographics, they could tell you how likely you were as an employer to have to manage a union organizing campaign. And so what was interesting is Lane talks about it in the context of like the lost years between the 70s and 80s, when there were like massive labor actions throughout, particularly throughout the South, led in part by like the movements of women and people of color. And so the union busting industry developed in reaction to basically curb that, to find ways to exploit divisions between race, to exploit divisions between gender by making certain positions very gendered and undesirable, right? Like we've seen with the traditional women's work. And they did this as a way to prevent unions from coming in. And so I think that, to your question, yes, there is potentially a science behind it, but that our opposition has been so clear about that science, perhaps longer than we have as a movement, that they've put systems in place and laws in place to make it difficult, right, to organize across those divisions. And like one of the things I think, Nomiki, talking today, like one of the big topics that everyone is all up in arms about, right, critical race theory, right. which everyone like misdefines, and no one even really knows they're talking about, except for like maybe 2% of the people. And but like the original theory came out of a labor fight of Black women at General Motors, right? Because they were the last hired, first fired. And, if you read Kimberly Crenshaw, who kind of is one of the founders of CRT, right, you find that like they were trying to have some remedy for the fact that they were losing their jobs. And yet Black men were still working in the plant. And so they couldn't represent Black people according to the courts. And white women were still working, even though they were in gendered positions. So they couldn't represent women. So there was no way for them to get remedy, right? And so this is why, like in the book, when we talk about centering white supremacy and gender discrimination as key to winning, we do it because it's like it literally is like these are all worker fights. This is not just some separate academic discussion that's happening. These are fights of regular everyday people who are trying to claim justice. And so to your last point to your question, and then let's see if we can pull Sarita in on audio. But like the last thing is that I think that one of the things that we introduce in the book is this idea of a new map, and not looking at states simply by who they voted for president in the last election, but trying to look more about what their relationship is to 20th century platforms for democracy. And what we've found in that is that the regions where they have long lost, if they ever had access, regions like the South and the Southwest, where the majority of Black people still live in the United States, where there are very heavy immigrant, particularly Mexican and Chicano populations in the US, that the appetite for organizing is perhaps more open and exciting and militant than it is in places where they recently have or have lost traditional means of organizing and collective bargaining and voting, right? So you look at the South actually, we could argue, is one of the most militant bases of workers for the labor movement. And it's actually on us to figure out how we're tapping into that and building power long-term based off of that. So, you know, it's not so much a question of sector by sector. I think certainly each workers in different sectors have different forms of power to throw into the fight to try to get to the table to negotiate with their employers. But that actually there's a new approach that we need to be thinking about in terms of reaching people who perhaps have been written off for the past couple of decades.
I just want to add in here that I also think I want to talk about women, and I want to talk about the economy and what were once considered sort of pink collar jobs.
That's right.
Are really now the fastest growing parts of our economy. And I think we're going to continue to see an upsurge of unionizing happening in these sectors, the care sector, the education sector. I mean, these are places, you know, right now women are, 47% of union membership are women, right? And in these pink collar sort of sectors, they are heavily unionized. And so I think we're going to continue to see a trend, retail, like I think we're just going to continue to see a trend in particular of women who are organizing for better conditions. And I think the pandemic really blew open the inequities in these profound ways. And especially the discussion that's been such a great and brewing conversation about the care economy is really forcing people, women across the economy, to say, it's true. Why don't I have paid family medical leave? Or why don't I have more bargaining power? Why don't I have the kind of flexibility I need, or childcare supports? And it's really motivating and galvanizing women in a particular way in this moment that I think is really exciting.
And just to tie it back, I mean, you mentioned, Erica, the CRT fight right now. That's whatever this manufactured attacks are. It's also happening as there are school boards that are being recalled or have been recalled in California. CRT, school board, and then of course the mask fight with teachers. And I say that because we all know that teachers, it's a majority female workforce. They've been on the front lines during the pandemic. They're fighting all across the country. We've seen, red state revolts. They're the largest donor to the Democratic Party, and they're the largest public sector employees.
That's
and so
right.
What I really love about your book, is that you flat out explain how this is a mechanism, anti-unionization is a mechanism of white supremacy and patriarchy. And so, oh my God, I wish we could talk about this so much more. I'd love to have you back on. Let's just say that.
We got it, especially when Sarita's back on the East Coast, and that's like good bandwidth. We're here for it.
Absolutely. No, would love to continue this conversation. It is really exciting. And as you know, in our book, we do talk about that, but we also profile teachers and the leaders in West Virginia. So people should definitely go to, thefutureweneed.com and order a book, and let's continue this conversation.
Go check out thefutureweneed.com. Really this was a great conversation. Very grateful to both of you for joining today. Sarita Gupta, who is in Oregon right now and the vice president of U.S. programs at the Ford Foundation. And of course, Erica Smiley, the executive director of Jobs with Justice, the authors of The Future We Need, Organizing for a Better Democracy in the 21st Century. Thank you so much for joining. Lovely conversation.
Also, Nomiki, anytime. This was a joy. Total joy.
Thank you.
All right, we will be right back with another one of our favorites, Kim Kelly, who has a book out, but we're going to do another interview about that. Today, we're going to talk about Amazon because it's a big day. We'll be right back after this short little break. guys, if this is the time, if you haven't already, make sure to join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. Our patrons are what keep this show alive and well. It's how we can do it on the road when I'm filming other stuff. It's how I can, honestly, seriously, it's how I can take all this gear with me on the flight because it's expensive to check those bags. Our patrons make sure everything happens. Make sure we have David working his butt off. That is how our community grows, because we can't rely on the algorithms. We know that the algorithms in little places like YouTube and Twitch and all the different spots that we release our show to, you just never can predict. One month you're doing kick ass, the other month you're down a certain percentage. It is patrons who keep us going.
Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. I'm so excited to have Kim Kelly on today of all days. This is the day. Kim Kelly is a writer and organizer based in Philly. She has a labor column in Teen Vogue, and her book, Fight Like Hell, The Untold Story of American Labor. We're going to be doing a long conversation about that one soon. Is it out? Is it official? I know I haven't.
No, April 26th.
April 26th.
Like less than a month.
Very exciting. Well, the union gods have blessed us with you and our previous segment before the Amazon. I mean, we had no idea this was going to happen this way. So what a day.
I've been dancing around my kitchen listening to Wu-Tang all morning.
I love it. I'm like, Chris Smalls, man. Wow. It was obviously an effort, but determined. I mean, I saw some of the texts that were sent out. If our audience doesn't remember, Christian Smalls is an Amazon worker who left, or who was fired, excuse me, for challenging Amazon during the beginning of the pandemic because of a lot of what we now know was going on internally, from not being able to go to the bathroom to so many other things. But all right, this is what I want to do with you, Kim, if it works for you. Can we talk about the arc of what Amazon workers have been through, including Bessemer, but probably more specifically these workers in Staten Island from that moment in the beginning of the pandemic to today?
Wow.
Well, I mean, Cliff Notes version.
Cliff Notes. And I do have to preface it by saying a lot of really incredible reporters have followed the Amazon fight at JK8 very closely. I'm not one of them, because I spent the whole last year writing a book and covering this coal miner strike in Alabama. But even the past few months, like since the formation of the Amazon labor union in Staten Island, it's been kind of a whirlwind. We've seen Amazon pulling out all their tricks, like, surveillance, calling the cops, trying to intimidate and bully the people organizing, trying to kick people out, trying to smear organizers like Chris Small in this case, and the things they said about them. I'm amazed that no one's caught hands for the kind of things they said about him. And just seeing this all unfold against the backdrop of this rerun election in Bessemer, which, as we know, last year, workers there attempted to organize with RWDSU. Amazon did what Amazon does and busted the hell out of the election and scared people. And, they got the result they wanted, but the NLRB was monitoring it, and they ruled that, due to unfair labor practices, they were due a rerun. So one thing that's just such an incredible strike of, like, I guess fate or happenstance, or maybe the labor gods were just up to something. The ballot counts for both elections happened on the same, or started on the same day, which was yesterday. I feel like every labor person in the world was just glued to Zoom all day trying to see what was going on with these ballots. And, you know, what happened with Bessemer, it's still, they can't catch a break because it's still complicated. The initial count, well, the initial count came out with Amazon, like the no votes, I think about 150 no votes ahead of the yes votes. But there are these 416 contested ballots, which will impact the election. So now they have to schedule a hearing to go through those. Like, we're not going to find out what actually happened there for probably a week or two. So that's a cliffhanger. But in Staten Island, I think they were able to do an in-person election, which seemed to have a big difference. And that turnout was massive and the victory was decisive. Like, this is building on months and years of organizing. You know, we still need to shout out Amazonians United in Chicago, who are doing their thing independently. And I'm sure there have been so many years of groundwork laid by organizers trying to crack away at this giant. You know,
so it's so interesting to me, and we've talked to Christian many times on the show. Determination, calling in from the parking lot, never stopping. But they decided to create their own union. Staten Island, for folks who may not be aware, Staten Island is part of New York City. It's one of the boroughs of New York. We should start off with that. New York City is as union town as you can get in the United States, and by the way, still has problems. RWDSU, the leader, is based here in New York. And I think a lot of folks were like, oh, that's interesting. You know, and Staten Island has a lot of union workers, even though Staten Island is a little bit more conservative as a borough. There's a lot of firefighters and teachers and police officers, and there's a huge Amazon facility, and many, many other public sector employees. So it seems this like a really interesting case for me, because when Bessemer happened, you know, there were some questions about, well, what went wrong, and why did they choose Bessemer first, RWDSU, and why didn't they go to Staten Island instead? But you know, Christian has said, you know, they wanted to do their own union. What's the kind of logic behind this? Can you help us understand how this stuff works?
Well, I mean, in the case of Bessemer, RWDSU didn't, you know, roll up and say, hey, let's unionize you. A worker at that Amazon facility called them. Daryl Richardson, he had experience with unions previously. He was working there for a while. He saw the lay of the land, was like, okay, we got to do something. And he went online and he basically just tried to find the most applicable union, picked out RWDSU and gave him a call. And RWDSU actually happens to have, the Mid-South Council has an office in Birmingham, which is only like 20 some minutes away from Bessemer. So that part kind of worked out. That's great. But I think in this case, it just comes down to what the workers decided to do. Like in Alabama, the workers decided, okay, we're going to hit up these guys, this union, we're going to get involved with them. We're going to throw in our chances with this institution. And then in Staten Island, workers decided to take things into their own hands, and that worked. I mean, that worked. There's obviously a different climate, like organizing in the Deep South in Alabama versus organizing right outside Manhattan. Like New York City is a union town. Birmingham used to be, but thanks to decades of legal nonsense from conservative politicians, it is a little less. Though I will say, no, that's a different thing. I was thinking of a different strike, because there's a lot going on. A lot of strikes. Yeah, I'm thinking about the coal miners who are just down the road, but this isn't about them today. It's interesting just seeing, like, honestly, I think a lot of people in the labor world are sort of gobsmacked about what happened in Staten Island. Like, very excited, but also like, what did we do wrong? Yeah. Well, not even that, but just like, well, how did they pull this off? Like, there's all these established playbooks that people use. Like, oh, this is how you do this. This is how you're supposed to do this. And these workers were like, okay, that's cute. Here's what we're gonna do. And then they won. So what does that say about the playbooks?
That's what I'm saying, is there's something very, let's have a real conversation about labor in this country. I mean, labor's obviously been under attack for decades, always. And I shouldn't say just for decades, always. A lot of labor is sort of entrenched with this establishment in union states, like in New York. There's a lot of that happening. Because of the conditioning of neoliberalism and whatever, you know, there's probably a little bit of a mindset in some unions, not all, of being afraid to take major risks because of the ramifications for many reasons. Do you think that maybe it doesn't necessarily directly relate to this situation, but do you think that mindset has maybe stifled some of the more gotten folks leadership used to kind of how you fight these strikes and efforts? When, do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's like you just like you become conditioned to it after a while.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of the old guard have forgotten how to fight.
There you go.
She
says it much simpler. I'm saying it with, I'm trying to I'm like, I don't want to have like Stuart Applebaum calling me up tomorrow.
Oh man, what a
judge of me.
I love Stuart, but yeah, like not every union is a fighting union anymore. I mean, not every union has had their fighting union moment, but I mean, a lot of them used to be a little more used to getting out there on the ground and organizing and getting down there with the people and really focusing on the nitty-gritty stuff that makes unions so important. I mean, throughout the movement, we have this kind of classic case of there's the more entrenched establishment generation that has the way they see things, the way they want things to be done. Mm-hmm. And then there's younger, newer generations who are coming in with different ideas, different approaches, and different perspectives on what a union can and should be doing. I mean, we've seen that play out. Like, look what happened with the Teamsters. Yeah. You know, the Hoffa dynasty has ended.
Amazing.
Which is
can you explain that for folks?
Yeah, just for like the cliff notes is essentially the Teamsters held this organization within the Teamsters of rank and file Teamster workers called the Teamsters for a Democratic Union that were challenging what they saw as a fundamentally undemocratic way of choosing their leadership, of keeping certain people and certain families in power at the expense of the members. Mm-hmm. And over the past year, there was this massive effort to change that. And now they have a brand new international president who's already making some interesting moves. And I mean, the Teamsters are about as old school and classic a union as you can get. And if they're shaking it up, maybe that means that other unions out there might have some food for thought, we'll say.
Well, and honestly, it's good for them. It's even good. I mean, if you want to go down to like the rawest of human aspects, like even for those in power at the union, it's good for you to be able to exercise and use your power. You know, if you have a union which is there to negotiate power in the rawest of ways, why not exercise it so that
getting out there, like with the UAW with their one member, one vote campaign, like members are not, I don't want to say fighting, but members are pushing back against some of this established structure and established order and saying, well, like our voices should be just as important as anybody else's in this union. This is our union. We're the union. I mean, that's the principle that we're seeing at JFK and Amazon. Like it was utterly impossible for Amazon to use the classic trope of like, oh, the third party, like, oh, this union's coming in to mess with you. Because the union was just Chris and some of his friends. Like it's literally us.
Do you think because of that? Oh, I mean, like, there's so much to this. I'm so fascinated with, and I hope someone writes a book about how they did it. Maybe I don't know. To me, this is like reading about the Cuban Revolution. Like, I know that sounds silly, but it's a small gang of folks who took on Goliath. And do you think like the militancy of being a small crew that obviously built out played a part in not
it sure seems like it. I mean, even I saw labor reporter Louis Leon saying, just remember, like Chris Smalls is an incredible organizer, but he's just one guy. There's an organizing committee of about 20 people who were part of this effort, and 20 people can get a lot of shit done. And it's harder to break up smaller groups. It's harder to say, oh, these people don't understand. These people. Well, that's just like Jeff and Krista. Like, what do you mean these people? Like, you can't break that down. That was something that Amazon tried to do in Bessemer, saying, oh, this New York union is coming down here to mess with what you got going on. And like,
there's some tropey there stuff there too.
Yeah, there's a lot complicated. And one of the easy, and then literally like they had an office in downtown Birmingham. So first of all, and also like it was being led by workers. Like Daryl made the call. Daryl and Jennifer and Perry, those people formed the organizing committee. It's different flavors of the same thing. It's just complicated. It's wild.
So do we know now, like, are they gonna? I mean, first off, what happens next?
I have a tweet to show you.
Yes,
well,
please.
I can't show you because we're on here, but I just saw this as I was waiting to jump in to talk to you. Again, there's a whole article, but who reads those?
As somebody who's actually writing them.
Yeah, you know,
listen, it's called a lead for a reason. Get it in the first paragraph because they'll never make it.
Honestly, like, yeah, here's this, and the important part is essentially the Amazon spokesperson told CNBC.com that we're disappointed with the outcome of the election in Staten Island because we believe having a direct relationship with the company is best for our employees, because that's worked so well before. An Amazon spokesperson said, we're evaluating our options, including filing objections based on the inappropriate and undue influence by the NLRB that we and others, right, including the National Retail Federation and U.S. Chamber of Commerce, witnessed in this election. So they're big mad. And they're apparently trying to, like, tattle on the NLRB, which is a
oversight
law enforcing body, not a union. Like, they're just mad at labor in general.
I'd love for Biden to cut all of Amazon's contracts with the government. Let's see how this plays out, buddy.
That'd be great for everybody.
I'd like to have our subsidies back. You know, all those tax dollars that went to your penis rocket, Mr. Bezos. I'd like to have those taxpayer funds back. It'd be really wonderful.
Dig your little facility up out of South Philly and get the fuck out of my town while you're at it.
Exactly. The warehouse down the street from me, you know. So is it possible now for ALU to be duplicated, like for them to grow as a union and become a union, like a large national union?
I guess it really depends on what they want, right? Like if they want that. I guess in purely hypothetical terms, I think there's so many lessons to be learned from them and the approach they took. And I mean, it's such a beautifully simple idea. Like, okay, we're going to get a group of people together and we're going to decide to do this. Like, you don't have to go through established structures to be a union. Like, you and a group of coworkers fighting together is a union. You don't need like the official stamp of approval. I mean, the IWW has been out here saying that since 1905. You know, the Amazonians United in Chicago have kind of brought that into the Amazon conversation years ago. And I mean, the concept of solidarity unionism exists. Mm-hmm. And I think a parallel in a way that we're seeing is, if you think about what's happening with the Starbucks Workers United campaign, like they are affiliated with Workers United, which is affiliated with SEIU. So they have that institutional backing. But the way this movement is spreading is pretty much worker to worker. Like we got four stores already here in Philly. And when I spoke to some folks who work there, some of the organizers a couple weeks ago for The Nation, and they were telling me like, yeah, we're on Discord, we have group chats, like there's other things in the works. Like we're just talking to people. I got a tea the other day walking home, and I stopped at a Starbucks and asked the person like, hey, are you guys unionizing? And they were like, we're trying.
They're like, yeah, we know who you are.
Well, I was in my gym clothes. I didn't want anybody to see me. But and I was like, you're gonna do it. And they're like, yeah. Like that you can't buy that. You can't replicate that inorganically. Like when the workers want to do something, they're realizing like, oh, we can just do this. And I think that's huge.
And it's you know, going back to the Bessemer thing for a second, because, you know, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and to see the Starbucks workers and Michelle's Eisen is amazing. And, you know, all of the workers and organizers there. But, you know, these are the Starbucks I went to as a kid. I mean, like, I would like sneak out of class and go get a Frappuccino on Elmwood. Where I have a lot of memories of that. One time I got in a car accident. I couldn't make it back to school because I got in a fender bender. Because I was skipping class. Sorry, Mom.
Who among us?
Sorry, Mom. I really needed that Frappuccino at that time. Anyways, the side note. What's really interesting is these successful, these recent success cases, or really active ones in Chicago, in Buffalo, in Philadelphia, in you know, all over the Northeast, really. And of course, Staten Island, these are what union towns. I mean, these are towns that either used to be much stronger. There's a union influence, union culture, but goes back to that point about Bessemer. There were a lot of questions over whether or not that was the most fertile place for RW or anybody to like really do the first effort. I still think it was great. I think the more, the merrier. Do it everywhere. It's not like, you know, ranking them, but does it seem like if you come from a union town, the chances that you're able to cross that cultural divide that might exist, because unions in the South have been like completely wrecked. You know what I mean? Like if you grew up with a dad that was a union worker or a mom or whatever, you're more likely to get it.
I mean, I would say if you come from a union family, I think that makes a big difference. Like I'm third generation union and I'm very proud of that, but not everyone in this country can say that because of the way unions have been kneecapped over the decades. But when we talk about what a union town looks like, I think, I don't know if regular people who aren't necessarily following all the news think of things that way or know what that means. Because if you live in New York and you're not in a union and you're just going to work and trying to survive in an expensive hellhole of a city, which I lived in for a long time, shout out to the hellhole. But you know, like if you're trying to get by and you see a random article saying, oh, of course, New York City is a union town, everyone knows that. And you're like, well, no one can afford to live here, and and homeless people are being treated like garbage, and our mayor is like an absolute freak who does not care about workers. Like, what about this means union? Like, so unions have headquarters here, cool, but what does that mean to me? I think like I think the union town designation means more to people in the movement and maybe in media than it does to normal working people. And I would love to see that change. Like I want it to mean something, to say, we're a union town. I think Philly does a pretty good job with that because we have people who actually work to make that happen. Like Helen Gim and Kendra Brooks, a lot of people in the city council are actually doing the work. Like we were talking earlier about the idea of the sort of informal or like worker fronted union. It made me think about Dorothy Lee Bolden and the National Domestic Workers Alliance that she formed back in the 60s. And that wasn't an official union, but she changed the lives of thousands of workers and organized them and helped build up education and got involved in voting rights. And now that organization still exists. And in Philly, a year or two ago, they helped get passed legislation that essentially is like the most progressive and helpful domestic worker legislation we've seen in a minute. Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. Like that's real. That is being a union town. Like you can't just put that on a bumper sticker and be like, yeah, unions are cool, we're down. Like you gotta mean it. And in the South, like there's a lot of unionists in the South who are trying to do the same thing. Birmingham has this really incredible history of industry and strong unionism and strikes, like going back to the mine mill and before. The UMWA is just down the road. Like I think that some cities and areas maybe lean on the idea of, oh, but we're a union, we're pro-union, without backing it up. And that's not really fair, you know? Like you can say that you can say it, but you got to be about it.
Yeah, and that includes, part of it is exercising power as a union. If you're supporting a politician, Eric Adams or people in the Senate or City Council of New York, then you also should flex and say, like, we need you to do more.
Do something.
Do something. New York City Council, hey, you're so progressive, do something. Everyone's getting evicted. Maybe stop taking real estate money and rezoning your neighborhoods. And,
people who are houseless have jobs too.
That's right. The majority.
Right? Like that, a union town should not be treating its people like garbage just because it isn't paying them enough to have a house. That's right. That's on you.
Oh, but the oligarchs, they deserve to have their pied-à-terres.
Right. Oh man, imagine how bad Jeff Bezos' day is. Oh my God.
He's just,
he's bathing in oligarch tears.
I'm sure he has some disco party that he can go to just, shake it off. I don't know if you saw that. Horrible.
Rich people are such freaks.
They're so weird.
Why? What's the point? If you're going to be so weird, just get a job. Just chill out.
Just weird. It's not like the artist would, like they think they're artists. It's this Burning Man crowd. And then I always felt weird around them. I'm like, you're not actually, there's something weird about your art. It's not, art to me is this is not making any sense right now. And this is more of a reflection of my work with my documentary right now. I'm around all these like crypto Burning Man bros. And I'm like,
man, that is
like, it's like capitalism on fire. And I'm like, you're doing mushrooms for the wrong reasons. It's not to take over the world.
Dude, this is why I'm glad I come from the heavy metal world where like nobody has money, but we all have a good time.
That's what I'm saying. All right. On that note, Kim Kelly, thank you so much for joining. Go pre-order Kim's book. We're going to have her on the end of April.
We're going to talk about the untold history of American labor. Got to get the plug in.
There, you got it. Right there. All right, Kim, have a wonderful, go celebrate.
Yeah.
Go celebrate. Enjoy.
Time to pop some bottles.
Exactly.
Like Chris Smalls, he's already on top of it.
I know. I've been texting him. I'm like, drinks on me at least. All right, guys. That was a wonderful show. Thank you so much to Kim Kelly for joining us today. I'm going to do some shout outs real quick before we wrap. Oh my goodness, look at all these patrons. Okay, we got some new patrons. Allison C, Safus or Kefus, COT, pledged for a year, damn. Braver with a 3, Braver Limit, David A, and your attorney. I mean, is this actually my attorney? I don't know. I'm really confused. Is it my attorney or not? They can't. It's all very, when you're a patron, I don't know your real identity. So maybe it is my attorney. And on Twic, thank you so much to Little Mac McG, cheering 1,000 bits. Welcome so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for subscribing. Nug Wrangler, we know Nug Wrangler. Nug Wrangler has been subscribed for 15 months. Thank you so much for subscribing over at Twitch. Sweet JP95, cheered 500 bits. Thank you so much. Dead Kelthy Frozen. I don't know what that means, but thank you for rating your channel. Wait, Dead Kel. Go check out Dead Kel. Where are my glasses? Oh, lady that I am. Yeah, it's Dead Kel the Frozen. Dead Kel the Frozen. There's got to be something I'm not. Or Dead Kelthy Frozen. Or Dead Kelth Frozen. Oh, God, you guys always confuse me. Everybody confuses me, and I'm like an old lady when it comes to this stuff because I'm not part of gamer culture. Sorry. Anyways. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. And as always, stay in solidarity.
The Nomiki Show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.